Step 1, our reason is going to be, it's taken straight from the what? The given. So our reason is going to be given. Step 2, where did this come from? It's the given again. Copy pasted right from the given. And we don't even have to do anything with it because we have angle this congruent to angle this. And so it's just marking a pair of angles congruent. So step 1, x, y, w, congruent with z, w, y, is marking those two. And then step 2, w, x, y, y, z, w, that's this pair of angles right here. So far we've got 2 pairs of angles, and we need one more thing. Well, if we look at step 3, we have w to y. Let's look at where that is. Oh, it's that same side in both of the triangles. So what property was that when it was that common side? Reflexive property. Exactly. So that is reflexive property. That common side. Quite a few of you got that far. Then we've got the triangles congruent. How many pairs of sides have we marked? How many steps of a pair of sides right now? Just one, right? That last step of reflexive property. How many pairs of angles? 2. And then take a look here. We have our 2 angles. That would be the side included between them, right? Is that side the one that we marked? No, so it is not the included side. So it's angle, angle, side. So now we've got the triangles congruent. Because we had that given information. We didn't have to do much with it. We just had it. Then we have reflexive property. And then we have those triangles congruent by angle, angle, side. Now, after that, we're being asked to prove that these lines are parallel. Parallel. Remember, that's what those railroad tracks mean. So we have w to x here and y to z here. So in order to get those congruent, let's use transversal that slices through them. So we want to get that pair of angles here marked the same. Well, luckily, we have the triangles congruent, so we know those are going to be the same. That's what it means for triangles to be congruent. And so our fancy name for that was CPCTC. Corresponding parts are congruent, triangles are congruent. Those matching sides and angles have to be the same. And now that we know those angles are the same, we take a look at where they are, and we say inside or outside those lines. Inside, and then same side or different side of this transversal? Different, because one is above it, one is below it. So that makes it alternate interior angles. And notice I'm using the converse this time, unlike last time where we were given they were parallel and then we talked about the angles. This time we got our angles and then used that to say, now I know that they're parallel. Okay. So that is our proof there. We got our triangles congruent by the angle, angle, side with that reflexive property. Then we wanted to know they're parallel, so CPCTC gave us those angles we were looking for, and those angles were alternate interior angles. Okay. Questions there? All right, flip the page. Flip the page. We're going to take a look at a couple problems of these with congruent triangles. Now, you've done a worksheet like this before, so these type of problems should look familiar. The idea behind this worksheet is that you are doing a justification for anything that you mark in the diagram. If it's not already marked in the diagram, you need a reason for it, which are reasons that we have talked about and we'll keep talking about. Then, if they're congruent, we're going to say which method we're using between side, 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 angle, and so on. If they're not congruent, then we'll just write not congruent. And also, if they're congruent, we're going to write our transformation, whether it's translation, rotation, or reflection. So, we'll take a look at number 1. And we've got some extra information that we can mark in that diagram. All right, so this is a review because we've done this before. Pretty sure I've given this exact problem before. So we've got some pairs of sides with those tick marks. Got tick marks there, and I've got tick marks there. Then we have these angles. Now those angles have to be congruent because those angles are what kind of angles? They're vertical angles. Good. They're across from each other. So we're going to write vertical angles are congruent. And that's our explanation. We marked something in the diagram. We've got to explain it. And so now our triangles are congruent. How many pairs of sides do we have? 2. How many pairs of angles? 1, which was the vertical angles. So we have angle included between the 2 sides. So that is side, angle, side. Now watch this one closely because this is tricky for people. Now that we know they're congruent, we're also going to say whether it's translation, rotation, or reflection. And if we check this one out, here's my pair of sides. A good way to do this is to keep track of where each side or each angle goes. So if it were a reflection, then what would it do? Well, it would flip like this, flip over here, and come over there. But does that have 2 tick marks on it? No, it doesn't. So it can't be a reflection because it didn't flip over where it was supposed to. If we take a look at where it actually goes is down here. And to get down there, it has to turn. It has to turn. So turn around like that. So that is a rotation. Now I'm going to pause for 30 seconds and have you take a look at number 2 and see what you see with number 2. Again, if it's not congruent, we're just going to write not congruent. If it is congruent, we're going to say which method we're using, and we're going to say whether it's translation, rotation, or reflection. How many pairs of angles? It's going to be just 1. And then, if I'm talking about how many pairs of sides, be careful here. It's still only 1. It's still only 1, which is this pair of sides right here. This side has 2 tick marks. This side has 3 tick marks. So it does not match. Therefore, we're going to put not congruent for number 2. Yeah. All right, so now that we got the idea of what we're doing, let's add in the stuff that we've been talking about for the last couple days. So let's go down to number 12. Let's go down to number 12. Now, right now, there is nothing marked congruent there. There's nothing marked congruent there. Well, what about those markings right there? We're saying that's not congruent? What is that? It's parallel. It's marking those parallel. So we'll come back to that in a second. But first, we can get a thing marked congruent, which is right here, by what? How do we know that that's congruent to itself? It's reflexive property. So we're going to write reflexive property. So we've got the reflexive property. Then here's my parallel lines. And then I've got a transversal that slices through those parallel lines, which gives me those 2 angles right there, which are alternate interior. Alternate interior angles. Not only that, but with these parallel lines and the same transversal cutting through it, I've got another pair of alternate interior angles that have to be the same. So therefore, I've got enough information for the triangles to be congruent. How many pairs of sides? Just 1. How many pairs of angles did I get? 2. Is my side included between those 2 angles? Yes, it is. So that's going to be angle, side, angle. And then we're going to put translation, rotation, or reflection. Keep track of where did this angle go? It turned to come over here. Rotation. All right. Last one we're going to do together. I'm going to pause for 30 seconds, let you try number 14. But if you got questions on 12, feel free to ask those too. That one was a lot. So there should be some angles that we're going to be able to get. See if you can pick out where those are and what kind of angles they are. And remember that if they're congruent and you pick out your method, I also want what transformation. Is it a translation, rotation, or reflection? I've been seeing some papers today that just have the method and don't have the translation, rotation, or reflection. So make sure we put that down. There's your parallel lines. We want to pick a transversal to cut through it. Where's that going to be? Well, let's watch. There it is. And that creates this angle right here and this angle right here. Those 2 angles are both in the same spot. They're top right with top right. Or if you like the shapes, they make that F shape, which makes them what kind? It's in the same spot, corresponding. And they're called, remember, they're called corresponding because they're in the same spot, top right with top right. So that's the good news. We got some corresponding angles that have to be the same. The bad news is that that is one pair of angles, and that is one pair of sides, which is not enough. So we're still going to say not congruent. And we're not going to put a transformation because they're not congruent. Because we can't use one of our methods if we only have two pieces of information. So that's our process. Anything not marked in the diagram, we explain it. If they're congruent, put your method, put your transformation. And if they're not congruent, we'll say not congruent. The new part is bringing in some of those parallel lines and the corresponding angles, alternate interior, and so on. So you'll see some of those. The rest of it is kind of like a worksheet that we've done before.